The blending and curving techniques shown in Chapter 4 are, I think, just about the most fun part of the picture postcard workflow. We go into Chapter 4 knowing that we've corrected for any unacceptable color. So what we have for color may not be particularly great, but there's nothing known to be wrong with it, and we can always accept it if we have to. Chapter 4 shows us how to make better contrast. And in doing that, in making a better contrast image, we can ignore the color altogether. We can just work with the channels of the image, try and make something that's contrastier, snappier, and then revert to the original color that we had going in. So it's a strategy game. Certain techniques show up more often than others. It's very rewarding if you do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is not there because it's just not to be found. Let me say at the outset that if the picture is basically very neutral, these techniques don't work particularly well. They also don't work particularly well if the image is full of a lot of different bright colors, because then you can hardly make any move without damaging one of them. But the more common varieties of image, those with a certain amount of color, maybe not very much, or with only one or two areas of bright color, these are prime pickings for this kind of blending and curving maneuver. I'm going to show one image from this chapter and one that's similar to one from this chapter so we can talk about these. First, I'd like to show the leopard of, I guess it's figure 4 through 8, 4.8 through 4.12. And this has been corrected for color. I'm going to make a new layer, and let's look at the individual channels. Here's the red, here's the green, here's the blue. Any of these channels could be improved with a curve, I think. However, the blue is the best looking of the three channels as we start. There's the red, that's probably the worst of the three. The green is a little bit better, and the blue is better still. Now, you could approach this in a number of ways. Like, for example, I could go to this green channel here and try a curve that looks like this, which would put more contrast into the leopard's head, at the cost, perhaps, of a little bit of detail around the mouth. I don't know. What would be the result of that? The overall color now becomes purple, but that doesn't matter because having done this, I can revert to the original color by going to luminosity mode, saying pick up the color from underneath. There's before, there's after. Interesting move, probably would have to cut the opacity. Don't like particularly what it's doing to the mouth, but certainly an acceptable strategy. Another would be just to use that blue that we showed you before. Okay, here's the RGB, and if I use the apply image command now and apply the blue to it, the blue applies to all three channels simultaneously. That's going to make the image a black and white. Doesn't make any difference because we can always revert to the color afterwards. It's probably too strong to make the image that dark. So arbitrarily I say 75% opacity. Now this doesn't look very good because the color is ruined, but we can always go back to the color just with luminosity mode. And see, this is a little bit better than the first version we did. There's before, there's after. If you think that's too much, you reduce the opacity further, and like that. So that's a good way of getting a lot of snap into the picture that can't be gotten in other ways. So the correction of this image was based on that blue blend. Okay, let me try something else. I'll do a full correction of this one. This is not in the book, but I chose it for this video because I think it's very similar to this strategy used in the picture of alligators, which is figure 4.15 in the book. Okay, we have grapevines. The greenery seems to be too light in relation to the grapes, and I would say let's assume that we would like to fix that. We have two objects of interest here, the grapes themselves and the leaves, and I would like to get more contrast in both. Okay, let me start off by looking at the color, see if anything's wrong with that. Okay, I'm looking at the greens, and these fall within my recommended values for greens. The grapes, I don't know what color these are supposed to be. Any sort of blue or purple might possibly be right as far as I know, although maybe some wine connoisseur would know more. Okay, so as far as I can see, there's nothing wrong with the color here, nothing that I would go in and correct. So we go on to this business of blending and curving that we just showed with the leopard. So I'm going to make a new layer and have a look at the individual channels. Here's the red, here's the green, here's the blue. I wouldn't say that this time that any one of these channels is necessarily better than the other. The blue has the best detail in the leaves, but the grapes are very light, which is not what we want. Okay, the red and also the green, here we'd really run into a problem with curves, because anything that would improve the leaves would wreck the grapes. They'd lose a lot of contrast there. It would sure be nice if the leaves and grapes were of the same darkness, of the same tonal value, because then one curve would be able to get them both. And that can be accomplished, I think, by blending some of the blue into the others. So here's the red, and I'm now going to blend some of the blue into the red. How much am I going to blend in? Enough so that the grapes and the leaves become almost equal. So that's 100%. That doesn't work. Let's try 50. That's getting to be close to being the same tonality. I'm going to go to 60% and see what happens. Okay, now the leaves and the grapes are about the same darkness. Let's look at before and after. There's before, there's after. And now that they're both of the same darkness, one curve will add contrast to both. Okay, with that curve, I certainly hope that we're going to get better leaves and better grapes both. There's before, there's after. Not bad. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the green channel. Here's the original. I'm going to blend some of the blue in there. It's going to have to be a different number this time. That's much too much. 40 maybe is not enough. 50 looks about right. And like this. Okay, where do we stand? This is the overall color. Here's before, here's after. Before you get too disgusted by it, remember that we can just go back to this original color whenever we like. Luminosity mode, like that. There's before, there's after. Now you see it's an entirely different picture with a lot more life in the leaves and well balanced, I think, between the fruit and the vine itself. Okay, why didn't I just work in luminosity to begin with? Because if we have it in luminosity mode, we can't really see what the channels look like. The channels have been recalculated, so if we look at the red channel, that's what it looks like in luminosity mode. But in normal mode, which is what we have to look at, we should see it as looking like that. So this is why we do the corrections first and then change to luminosity mode and live with it. Okay, so here's what the color looks like. Let me flatten the image. And for the sake of argument, I think I'll just show a couple of moves beyond this. Okay, this is the sort of image that would work well with the HK action, which is shown in chapter 13. So I'm going to pop that action on it, which darkens the neutrals and takes a little bit of color away. I don't care, because we're going to be able to add a lot of color in a different way, which is the color boosting and the Man from Mars, which is going to be shown in chapters 5 and 6. It requires a selection, and it requires an LAB file. So I'm going to go to LAB, flatten, and maybe I'll select all, run the action, and now see we've got more color than anybody would ever want. I can do this in a whole bunch of different ways. I think I'll do it this way. That seems nice and colorful to me. I'll call it quits there. And I have a sharpening action too, and you'll see that in chapter 15. So let me sharpen this image. Let's take a look and see how the sharpening seems. Pretty good. I'm not even certain that I need to reduce the opacity of it at all. Maybe I'll do it just to show that it's possible. So, like that. So that's what a real quick correction based on luminosity can do for us. And now I would like to, I think, revert to the original to show what a difference that blend made. See, there was the original picture. And look at what all was put into it as a result of blending. So this is the sort of thing that you want to think about when you look at the channels. After you're satisfied that the color is good, you can often find a way to really put a lot of depth into the picture with blending and with curving.